Hi, everyone. I don't know if the owl is gonna look at me.
It will.
Okay.
The owl sees everything.
Yay. Hi, everyone on Zoom and in the room. Thanks for coming. We have an exciting presentation today, but we're gonna get to that in a few minutes after we do our general updates from members. And is everyone ready to kick it off in the room, maybe?
That sounds good.
Okay, we'll start with Chris.
Oh, gosh. Howdy, everybody. I guess just brief updates. We're getting ready for some prescribed fires this fall. Some of them were canceled this spring, some of our grassland units in the Sonoma Valley. Also hoping to do some burning up near Kellogg and burn pile, calling it burn pile palooza on the coast this winter. We prepped a whole bunch of larger units for future prescribed burning that need to burn off those prescribed line edges. I'll leave it at that.
Nice. Okay, and then we can jump over to Zoom. I see Adriana first on my screen.
Oh, sorry, my computer froze up for a minute there. Hi, everyone. It's great to see such a good crowd in the room. Yeah, my updates. I would say lots of workshops are happening between the RCDs and Ag and Open Space. And Rose will be sharing those later in the meeting. But we're very excited to be offering those opportunities to get out in the field and learn from each other in situ. And what else? We've got a rebate or a cost share program through NRCS, a partnership with NRCS called RCPP. It's our kind of wildfire fuels management program, and it is very similar to EQIP for those of you who have used EQIP before, but yeah, it's focused primarily on wildfire management and some of the practices that we can reimburse landowners for include targeted grazing, prescribed fire, forest thinning, brush management, kind of your usual platter of vegetation management options. So if you would like to participate in this program, just reach out to me or Rose and we'll get you hooked up with NRCS. And yeah, I wanted to mention that. And I think I'll just leave it there for now. Thanks.
Okay, and then back into the room with Stephen.
Stephen Swain, UC Cooperative Extension, we're in Sonoma counties, and been doing more Japanese knotweed eradication. We are nowhere near done. It's been 5 years. That was the projected timeline for the thing, and I imagine I'm going to spend the rest of my career hunting for this stuff in the San Geronimo watershed, which is not really good news. We've got one or two things on the radar screen. I think I already talked to this about Mediterranean oak borer and invasive shotpole borer last time I did an update. Went out and looked at a new disease of redbud that seems to be showing up here in the Sonoma Valley. We've got a vascular streak dieback caused apparently by some sort of rhizoctonia. I'm not used to seeing that on hardwoods, so that's weird. And there's plenty of stuff going. I'm trying to gear up the bilingual landscaper training that we're putting on again in early 2025, and hopefully we can do better this year. And I think that's enough.
Nice, thank you. All right.
Jason Wells, Sonoma RCD. Sort of summarize it, I guess we've just been working with a lot of different community groups and trying to develop projects for whether they're forest health type projects or fire prevention type projects, but actually getting some on the ground eyes on these things, shoring things up to be feasible, practical, and funding ready.
Nice. Okay, let's jump back over to Zoom to Benjamin Bravo.
I have to do 11.
Okay. Benjamin, are you ready to give an update? Oh, not ready. Okay, no problem. We'll move forward to Shay Hopkins.
Hey y'all, Shay from Pepperwood Preserve. We've got a couple things going on, wrapped up unit prep for 35-acre broadcast burn. Hoping to get that in end of October, maybe early September. We'll see how it goes. Led by CAL FIRE. Like most other people gearing up for pile burn season. Super stoked for that. And then we recently wrapped up our grazing season. So cows are off the preserve. We put in 9 new troughs. So hoping to break the paddocks up into smaller portions. And then we also have a biological consultant, Julie Rudruff, doing some northern saw-whet owl banding at the preserve right now. They're doing like some mist net traps, and so that's pretty exciting. We're having volunteers come out and catch owls. They got 5 on the first night, so that was really cool. They're pretty cute, little owl puffballs. Yeah, that's kind of our updates.
Great, thank you for sharing.
Mhm.
Okay, Shanti in the room, do you want to share out?
So I work with Chris Carlson, leading the Living with Fire team with Sonoma Land Trust, and actually Chris already gave a share out on an immense amount of fuel management and reduction work happening on the coast and getting ready to burn.
That's good.
Okay, and then I kind of skipped Jill, back, sitting in the back row. Are you ready to give an update?
Sure. Jill Butler, representing Willow River Watershed Council. Excuse me. I'm having allergies. We're wrapping up habitat typing. We'll work another month or so if the weather holds. And they've got good rains up there on Saturday. Annapolis and Guala had about an inch.
Oh, wow.
That's biologically significant, and hopefully the mouth of the river will open and maybe some of the fall run fish can get in. I did mean to say the Sean and company who are out working in the watershed are seeing a lot of steelhead this summer, so that's encouraging.
That's great.
Great. Thank you. All right, jumping back into Zoom, we have Mitha from Pepperwood. Let me know if I pronounced your name right. Oh,
Hi.
you're on mute, so.
You're on mute right now.
Here I am. Hi. Yeah, Shay just gave our update, and I actually just started as a preserve ecologist about a month ago at Pepperwood. And so I'm excited to meet everybody and hear about what your group works on. So that's all for me.
Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
All right, back in the room. Can we jump to Ryan for a little update?
Well, this is my first time to the group. Thanks for having me. So I'm just mostly here to hear what you all have been working on and to share out what I've been working on with Shanti at Sonoma Land Trust and also with General Headlands Reserve at Wildlands Conservancy. So you'll be hearing more about that later.
Great. Thanks for joining us. All right, let's see who else is on Zoom. Oh, we have Brooke Edwards.
Good morning, everyone. Brooke Edwards from Sonoma County Regional Parks. We're gearing up for a busy prescribed fire season. We're working with Audubon Canyon Ranch and CAL FIRE on a number of burns. And the properties that we're looking at doing the burns at are Monterey Redwoods, Tole Ranch, Carrington out on the coast, and Shiloh Ranch. So busy burn season. We've already partnered on a couple of burns with Audubon Canyon Ranch and state parks out on the coast. And so we'll be tying in with those groups as well as our own internal prescribed fire crew that we have with regional parks. So looking forward to a good burn season. That's it for me.
Great. Thank you, Brooke. Okay, Kim, what about you?
Yeah, hi folks, Kim Batchelder, Ag and Open Space, Vegetation Management Coordinator. We have things are progressing pretty fast and furious. This weekend, we have an excellent workshop that's geared towards the Oddfellows south side of the Russian River Shaded Fuel Break project. It's a really great collaboration between a lot of different communities like Oddfellows and Summer Home Park, as well as kind of the canyons area above the Russian River along kind of the northern stretch there, or eastern stretch. And so the fuel break was designed to go all the way to Martinelli Road from Oddfellows. And so we've been relatively successful in doing that. But this workshop that we're going to be hosting on Saturday is geared towards showing 4 different fuel treatments. The shaded fuel break along the ridge line, some pile burning that they had set up. We were hoping to do a burn on Saturday, but the red flag kind of squashed that idea. And then we will be showing kind of the dynamics and prescriptions that that Pepperwood actually designed and helped develop. And then Devin from Pepperwood will be joining us on Saturday. We also have the folks who implemented the shaded fuel break with Environmental Resource Solutions. Gold Ridge will be there, helping us to coordinate the events, as well as Cal Poly Swanton Ranch, who have done these workshops all over California. Then the other fuel treatments we'll look at will be some defensible space right within the community, and the idea of being able to do the common area around the homes, and then stretching up, ultimately doing some prescribed burns up to the shaded fuel break. That's the intention. So that was designed with help from CAL FIRE. We had several groups, Oddfellows, Summer Home, and a group called Y Conduit, who kind of managed the groups in the canyons. And so, yeah, it should be a good event. We have 30 people signed up, and we have closed the registration. However, we hope to do the similar event on the eastern side of the county along the Mayacamas, and we're in the process of designing that now. Hoping for, I think it's March 8th would be the date for that. So we'll be reaching out to folks on the eastern part of the county to really talk about how those types of habitats, the oak woodlands, the grasslands, how to manage to fur in that area, how to manage post-fire vegetation types. So that's going to be an interesting call. So look forward to hosting that.
Thanks. Looking forward to that too. Okay. I think on Zoom, we still have Sloan. Do you want to give us an update?
Yeah, hi everyone. Good to see everyone in the room. Over here at NRCS, we are currently in an open application period for EQIP and RCPP. Applications for EQIP are due November 15th and for RCPP November 8th. So if you're interested in applying, please reach out to me anytime before that deadline. Something new this year is that all applications must be submitted by the deadline correctly, so without any errors. So please reach out to me as soon as possible so we can get started on your application, correct any of those errors. I'll draw my email into the chat, and so please reach out to me if you're interested in applying.
Okay, great. Thanks for dropping your email, and I'll add it to the minutes as well. And then also on Zoom, Benjamin, did you want to give an update now?
Hello, I work for Landpaths. I should have obscured my background. Oh well. Work for Landpath. We're doing some. There's a baby here too. We're doing some prescribed burns at our Groveville trees and Ocean Song preserves. I believe Ocean Song is about 25 acres. The Grove is substantially smaller. Those will both be now in November, and in the next few months we'll be doing some volunteer days. We have volunteer forestry days. We have a what is it called? QFFP, Queer Forestry and Fire program that we've started. One of my fantastic coworkers, Laura, is running that to kind of bring community and volunteer forestry together on some of our Riddell and Ocean Song preserves. And we're also doing trying out a new program called I forget what it's called, but it's trying to do small patch burns instead of prescribed burns. So it's kind of a complement to our prescribed burns, where they're kind of more logistically complex. And so we have these small patch burns that we're using just the basic burn pile permit. We're kind of stretching the limits of what you can do with a basic burn pile permit to do some patch burns to kind of clean up some forestry areas. Some of it's shaded field break, some of it's more for habitat reasons. And we're doing a little bit of pre and post monitoring as well of the forest density at some of these sites. I think that sums it up. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. That sounds exciting. I'm gonna look forward to hearing how the patch burns go. All right, I think that's everyone but me, and my main updates are probably gonna be during the workshop section when we tell you about upcoming events, so I'll just save it for then. And then the next thing on the agenda, we wanted to reflect on our fall picnic. It was really great to have so many people come together in person, and thanks again to Brooke for helping us secure our spot at the park and leading us on a guided tour. We just wanted to reflect and ask everyone if they had thoughts on what went well and what you would want to change for next time. How often you might want to have a picnic like that. Yeah.
I thought it went really well. Really appreciate all the folks who stepped up and prepared food. Thanks to Fred Brad and his, I think it's son-in-law that helped him out with that. So that was great to have such delicious food. I was happy that Jason Mills brought in a crew that was working in that area to be able to share the wealth and get them engaged. I thought it was really good of Chris Gabriel to be able to show up from the Supervisor Gore's office and be able to share his perspective on the importance of the work that we're doing vis-a-vis the climate action plan that was just adopted by the board, which emphasizes the need to do better fuels management and forest management for the purposes of having healthier forests, which is the whole purpose of why we meet every month. So that was exciting to be able to do that on the ground.
Definitely. Let's see, anyone else who was at the picnic? Brooke or Adriana on Zoom? Any thoughts about next time?
I thought maybe just that Fred brought too much food. We had so much, it was so delicious. I feel like we should have all packed our pockets when we went home and took some of it with us. Yeah, no, it was great. Brooke, go ahead.
Yeah, I just would want to say, we're happy to host the group at really any of our regional parks. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, I thought it was a great idea getting together. We usually have a Christmas party in December with the group. And so I think it makes sense to maybe have one in the summer where we can kind of have a summer picnic, talk about the work that we've done, and then hopefully be in a natural area where we can take a hike and take a look at the forest structure and any kind of fuels reduction work that we might be doing. So, just to kind of further that discussion along.
Brooke, do you think it's possible for the next outing to give everybody a torch and we could do some prescribed burning up at Monterey or something like that?
Yeah, in December.
That is a great idea. Yeah. Well, we have plenty of burn piles, so
Right?
we could start with burn piles and move on to prescribed fire.
Exactly. I love it.
That would be fun. Okay. Great. All right. Any other thoughts? Jason, how'd you like it?
It's not bad for Fred. A lot.
Working hard on the barbecue.
Put them on, but it was all good. Nice to get together.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, sweet. And then speaking of the holiday party, we could kind of jump ahead. I just wanted to talk to everyone about if we want to just have the holiday party and not the meeting on that Thursday, or do meeting then get together that evening. Any thoughts? I feel like Kim, you're the one who's like
I'm all about the margaritas at the
Okay.
end of the day, so
Okay.
that's, you know, I think it's helpful for folks to be able to spend, one evening, or, late afternoon. Especially from people who have to travel, so if you come in to do a midday thing and then later in the afternoon, we might have some attrition. So that's what we've typically done is forewent the, meeting during the day and then, met, in the evening.
Okay, great. And then I'll just pull up the calendar. I think that's gonna be December 19th.
That's about right.
Okay, great. So we'll plan on that and just change the schedule up for that.
That sounds great.
Great. And then I also wanted to get folks' input on our November meeting topic, because right now we don't have a guest speaker lined up, and if anyone wants to share, has some interesting things that they've been working on, or has an interesting presentation that you've heard recently, that we could pull that person in. This would be a great time to let me know. We have some past suggestions. One is Pepperwood biotic impacts of forest treatments, including prescribed fire, and a paired study in the Sierras with a study at Pepperwood. And this was about Pepperwood's watershed study on impacts of thinning and prescribed fire on the water table. I don't know if you've heard about that yet, but that's from a past suggestion list. And we also have a suggestion, which I guess we get asked a lot, which is how to work with PG&E on vegetation management. Yeah, any other updates or anyone on Zoom? Do you have anything that you want to share with us next month?
I've been, attending these Tuesday weekly webinars that are hosted by the Resilient Landscape Coalition, which is UC Master Gardeners, the Sonoma Ecology Center, UC Cooperative Extension, and Fire Safe Sonoma. And so they've been hosting hour-long webinars in the evenings on Tuesdays for the month. And so we could ask them to come in and give a condensed version, or maybe a focus, like, for instance, they did Beyond Defensible Space for the first session, and that was Eric Shu from Sonoma Ecology Center. They also provided, gardening tips around the home in the first 0 to 5, 5 to 30 feet. And that was kind of talking and mixing in the use of native plants and the importance of that for biodiversity perspective and retaining our native vegetation. And the final one is on maintenance. So they might be able to condense that down into maybe an hour-long presentation to us. Might be worthwhile. I'm sure they would be willing to do it.
That's a good idea. And I guess speaking of Eric, we could have an update or a walkthrough on the now public Tending Your Land website, and just a chance to kind of show that off a bit. Okay, and then
Has this group ever heard from Brock Dolman about the Fuels to Flows work that he does? I know that he's been partnering with regional parks on a couple new projects, and it could be interesting to have an update now that there's more on the ground.
For sure. Yeah, we hosted a workshop out at OAEC probably 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
They had a fire safe one last weekend. But yeah, I mean, to the larger audience, Brock could do a great job. Especially with the new beaver initiative that they have going on. That would be pretty fun to hear about exactly what would be the large term perspective on introducing beaver into various habitat types.
Yeah.
that'd be great to hear about. Okay, great. Have those suggestions down and we'll work up something. Let's see, well, we're moving kind of quickly through our agenda topics. And I think, are we still waiting for one more person for the presentation?
Yeah,
Maybe.
I mean, we could start and then you can fill in.
There he is.
Oh, here we
Yeah.
Perfect timing.
I was just waiting.
Okay, great.
go. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
So, let's.
those people online, or on Zoom, you're missing out on the trifecta from Headlands. These guys are conservation rock stars in both from Point Blue, Wildlands Conservancy, and Sonoma Land Trust. So we appreciate you guys coming in person and being able to share with us your presentation today.
Thank you. I'm so grateful that both the Ryans made quite a trip to get into town and
Yeah.
be here. And I love being back in this room. It's been since COVID. I just want to say Sonoma Land Trust was one of the founders of the Forest Working Group back in 2006. We helped host the first meeting, recognizing along with our partners with CAL FIRE and Jill and Ag and Open Space and others that private lands comprise most of the forest land of Sonoma County, and how those lands are stewarded really makes a difference in terms of biodiversity outcomes, climate resilience, fire, and all of that. And I want to also credit Carolyn Stafford for being like such a strong voice for being proactive around fire in the county long before the big mega fires. So to kick off the presentation, we're going to introduce ourselves and then we'll launch into it. I'm Shanti Edwards with Sonoma Land Trust, Sonoma Coast Program Manager. And we were the kind of the lead applicant on this grant, but the real work was really with DiGaudio, who with Point Blue. And then the work at the Headlands, I think, is scaled up enormously. It's like kind of larger than most groups are pulling off. And so I'm really excited for Berger to share with us. Go for it.
Yeah, so I'm Ryan DiGaudio. You can refer to me as Ryan D for today. And I'm an ecologist with Point Blue. I've been with Point Blue for over 20 years now. When I started with them, they were the Point Reyes Bird Observatory, and then we changed our name because we don't just work in Point Reyes and we don't just work with birds. So hence the name change. But I still do a lot of my work in the North Bay area. I've been doing primarily focused on bird conservation and bird monitoring, a lot on rangelands, grasslands, but also in forest settings as well. And so, I was one of the first, Point Blue ecologists to do bird monitoring out at the Headlands back in 2010, first year. But I'll stop there before I start getting too far into what we're talking about.
It's a pleasure to be able to present with the both of you guys. Shanti, last night you had your 20-year celebration for your dedication to Sonoma Land Trust. Right, 20 years. Like, pretty impressive to be dedicating that much time in advancing this field. So good job. Ryan Berger, Ryan B for today. I'm with the Wildlands Conservancy. I'm the Sonoma Coast Preserve Manager, overseeing management at the Headlands and the Estero Americano down in Bodega Bay. Just, to say, I'm fairly new to this field, 2.5 years with the organization, but what a special opportunity to be out of Headlands. And a lot of credit goes to the hard work of the folks that went through the acquisition process, many of them in this room, and then laying the foundation for the goals and outlining what stewardship, goals in forest, rangeland management, grasslands and the watershed. It's really helpful to be able to use that as a piece of tool for how we're looking forward. I'll stay high level because I know this audience is pretty familiar with forest management practices and stuff, but I'm happy to answer questions as we go through.
So I'm going to just kick off this description of the project. We worked with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Land Trust Bird Conservation Initiative. So it's a very special grant program just for land trusts, and actually just for accredited land trusts that follow standards and practices that are approved by the Land Trust Alliance. And so that was Sonoma Land Trust. We were able to kind of capture the opportunity, but because of our longstanding partnerships in place, existing with Point Blue and with the Wildlands Conservancy, it was easy to mobilize and organize around a project where we were focusing on birds as a barometer of habitat health. And as we all know, hundreds or millions of dollars are coming into Sonoma County to address our wildfire resilience needs and make our communities safer and protect our forests. And we wanted to measure the impacts of our work. We're really altering the structure and composition of our forest lands, and working with the top ecologists with Point Blue, we knew that we could design a project where we could really evaluate changes in the landscape and really tune into the health of these lands using birds as an indicator of habitat health. So we're going to walk you through some of the forest management treatments. Ryan's going to talk about the study design and the findings. In terms of project locations, Sonoma Land Trust is very active on the Sonoma coast. We were the lead group coordinating the acquisition and protection of 6,300 acres on the Sonoma coast, stretching from the Little Black Mountain Preserve that was donated to us in 1979. We were the ones to spearhead the Jenner Headlands acquisition in 2009, but Ag and Open Space and State Coastal Conservancy are primary funders among many others. And of course, Wildlands Conservancy stepped in and kind of saved the deal when the state was bankrupt in 2009 and ultimately became the long-term steward of that land. And Pole Mountain is the connection in between, and it's this 2,200 acre like summit that atop, kind of this like mountainous landscape. And so it's a focal point for the entire region because it's very visible. It's kind of melts together, inland and coastal climate, but it's scenic, it's iconic. It's a destination for the Sea to Sky Trail. So hikers along the way can hike through the coastal prairie on the Jenner Headlands, through the coniferous forest, up to the oak woodland the peak at the top. So with these lands, we had existing studies, we wanted to build on it, but we also wanted to pair the project with our Bear Canyon Wildlands property that's in the very fire prone and very fire active part of the county. It actually burned in one of the recent fires. And so we have these inland and coastal project sites. And Ryan's going to introduce Jenner.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe before going on, I forgot to mention that I also used to work for Point Blue as a parallel biologist, so I can very much appreciate using birds as indicators, especially over long-term data sets. But I wanted to show a quick map of the vegetation at the Jenner Headlands, recognizing that it's 5,630 acres. Sometimes I scratch my head wondering what I signed up for when I look at how big it is and the scale of the projects that we're doing, but it is very rewarding. The light beige towards the coast is all coastal grassland and prairie. And then what we're going to be focusing on, obviously, is the forest aspect of it, which is dominated by redwoods and Doug fir. We do have some hardwood and chaparral mixed in there as you get further up into the inland and elevation. The pink line that's drawn in there, that is where we really focused on our ridgetop roads and where we wanted to create shaded fuel breaks, right? For the safe ingress, egress of CAL FIRE community members, and to kind of create a contiguous shaded fuel break across the property from Duncan's Mill side on the east out towards the coastal prairie on the west. And we used somewhat different techniques that I'll break down later on to describe, how we went about shaded fuel breaks, and then restoration forestry. So the big hashed area in green was a slightly different approach. We didn't manage it all in that way, but just wanted to paint the picture. And I think if you hit the slide, there might be another animation that comes up. No problem.
Go back.
No, you're good. Later on, I just wanted to overlap it with Ryan's map to show where the bird points were and how it overlapped with where those shaded field breaks were. But yeah.
Yeah, so Point Blue, we first got out there, Brooke invited us to partner in doing a big assessment of the coastal grasslands in 2010, which was when this was still a sort of a newborn preserve. And then, so 2010, 2011, we focused on the coastal grasslands, evaluating, comparing the grazed Jenner Headlands with the adjacent ungrazed Sonoma Coast State Park, and we found that there were a lot more grassland birds in the grazed Jenner Headlands. So that was a good reason to continue grazing on the grasslands. But then a couple of years later, we wanted to turn our focus to the forest habitat, Jenner Headlands. And so 2012, we did some preliminary surveys, and then it was really 2013, 2014, we did our full court press point count protocols on the ridgetop shaded fuel breaks and in the restoration forestry area. And then after 2014, there was a long pause. We weren't able to get back to reassess the birds in those sites until 2023 and 24. So we're really excited to have this opportunity to evaluate any changes that took place. Now I'm kicking it back to Ryan B.
And again, I'll keep this high level because I think this audience is pretty informed about this, but what are we doing on the General Headlands Preserve with regards to forest management practices? So we have this info sign at our trailhead down when you enter the preserve, and then also as you come into the forest on Sea to Sky. And it's essentially trying to depict and give that visual of creating shaded fuel breaks and protecting the forest from wildfire. Right? We used to have fire on a regular basis in the forest. However many years ago, we stopped doing that, and then we created this very thick and unhealthier forest in that way. And so what we want to do is on our ridgetop roads, 150 to 300 feet on either side, thin it out, remove ladder fuels, and create that shade still so that it's cooler temperature and reduces the amount of undergrowth that's going to pop up. And hopefully in the end, bring fire back and have a healthier forest that has ferns, redwood swirl, irises, those sort of things on the forest floor. And then restoring old growth redwood forests. So what are those characteristics? Higher biodiversity, mixed age of the trees, soil is healthy, canopy openings, you have some decaying ground layer, varying topography, and standing snags for habitat. So we want to continue to create that. We use a slightly different method in terms of a timber harvest that I'll go into a little bit more detail. So just kind of high level to set the stage. Go to the next slide. This is what we actually did. So it's pretty neat, to come 10 years later after having initiated some of those shaded fuel breaks, seeing what the difference is after that time has passed. But so in the blue area, this is zoomed in on some of our ridgetop roads and highlighting where we focused our work. So eastern shaded fuel break is the blue shaded, and that was initiated in 2013. And you can see where the hash marks are. That figure is a little bit outdated. We can essentially hash mark that entire blue area because shaded fuel break is now extended from Magic Mountain Road all the way to our border with the par meters. And CAL FIRE has come in and done prescribed burns in different burn units since then. And so we're continuing to do those partners throughout the state. That totals 106 acres. There's another bullet that'll come up. So the western shaded fuel break is in red, and that was done in kind of three different fashions. The first one was you split that kind of red area into three different groups of 30 acres roughly, totaling 92. 2018 initiated on the most eastern part where number 1 is located. That was a lot more hand crews coming in, doing lop and scatter work, removing ladder fuels, not a lot of heavy equipment. And then the other 30 acres of 2 and 3 were completed in 2 different phases with the timber harvest plan. What that allowed us to do is harvest those larger diameter trees. So with the hand crews, we're cutting 10-inch DBH or less, and then lopping and scatter. Now we actually went through with heavy equipment, went in, removed those large diameter trees, and we're able to take them to the mill, try to help generate funds that would pay for the project overall. So a slightly different approach in that. And those were done in 2 different phases because winter rain shut us down. We weren't able to complete it in 1 year. Next slide. The green, that was our Upper Russian Gulch area, completed September to November of 2023. It's 15 acres. So we did not treat that entire green area. We had a lot of tan oak die off in there that did change the structure of the canopy anyways. But just for logistical, we stick to our trail system and our ridgetop roads there. So that's the yellow shaded portion of it. And that was where we were really trying to do thin and release, take, those fairy rings, leave the biggest tree behind, remove the smaller redwoods to release those resources that would feed into the bigger trees and create those old growth characteristics. My last point on this slide is just to highlight that we do annual monitoring of northern spotted owls. It was in service to the timber harvest plan for a while, but if we're trying to move the needle back to old growth characteristics, this species depends on that. We want to continue to do that long term, and we plan on doing that over time. A few photos just to show the differences, right? On the left, pre-treatment, you can't see through the forest. Come in with those hand crews, do prescribed burns, remove the ladder fuels. Now we have post-treatment, you see a healthier forest. And that is the shaded fuel breaks. And then the next slide is just a depiction of, if we had 1 acre of property back when there were old growth trees on there, there was about 30 of them per acre. It was mismanaged. We cut down and logged it multiple times to build San Francisco. And where 1 tree stood, there's 6 or 7 in a fairy ring. Those are all competing for resources. They're smaller, generally not in good health, let's remove some of those and move it back to larger, more mature forest stands.
Okay, so I'm gonna introduce kind of the work that took place on Sonoma Land Trust Preserves. This is just north of the Jenner Headlands, so kind of inland a little bit, but connected. So in terms of our properties, I want to credit Jill Butler, standing right behind me, for her role in helping us to craft our CFIT plans decades ago, like at Little Black Mountain and Pole Mountain, really kind of like setting forth the blueprint for really thinking about fuel breaks long before the large fires took place. And we've been building on this work since 2004. Harold Appleton, I don't think he was on the call, but he's our forester, helped us to design and implement these projects in various ways. So in the past, we were really trying to address these conditions here. So the kind of Creighton Ridge fire area of the coast region was an area impacted by the 1978 fire, 12,000 acres that blew through the area. And this is right after a lot of heavy logging in the 1950s and 60s. So up here, this is a picture of Pole Mountain, the historic aerials at the top. That's 1953, contrasted with 1980. And it's kind of hard to see, but basically it kind of looks like a bomb went off. There were lots of roads, like the area like burned to the ground because of the large diameter trees being removed from the logging. And then what came back was a lot of dense conifer regrowth and resprouting hardwoods. And then further impacted by tree plantings in the early 80s, that whole area was planted with lots and lots of conifers, including non-native pines and incense cedars. And so I think on Little Black Mountain, like 34,000 trees alone were planted. And so what we had was just an even age stand that was a wall of vegetation, very dense, unhealthy, and dark, and not very open, and not favoring oaks and other species that are important for habitat. So over the years, we were focusing primarily on linear fuel breaks, as most groups were. But then in 2020, we implemented the first CFIT plan using NRCS funding at Pole Mountain. And then in 2023, we implemented another fuel break with NRCS support, but in this case, you can see the kind of orange and yellow. Those are areas where we tied our kind of fuel break area to hairpin turns in the road or parallel skid roads, so that we were able to create containment areas for future prescribed burning. And so, our fuel break and mechanical treatments were, in recent years, and then a lot of burning took place in 2023 in partnership with CAL FIRE, also in partnership with the Kashaya, who provided tribal monitoring when we have live fire on the land. Yeah, there's a lot to say about what it takes to go into a burn, but we were focusing primarily on consumption. We were trying to get rid of all of that lop and scatter because it was just an immense amount of fuel on the landscape. It wasn't decomposing, and ultimately we needed to kind of burn it off so that we were burning it under optimal conditions instead of waiting for a wildfire event to kind of come blow through the area and really take off. This last year, we burned over 4 different days on like about 39 acres. And then in terms of I want to kind of speak to some of the lessons learned, and Chris, feel free to chime in here. So we had a lot of variable effects with the burning, and ultimately, like, we put a lot of work into protecting habitat trees, the retention trees that we wanted to keep as we burned off all the surrounding fuel. On Pole Mountain, there are a lot of just majestic old growth hardwoods with cavities and like cat-faced trees, and like just a lot of characteristics that made it very vulnerable to fire getting in and scorching these trees. So we've had multiple crews, even Boy Scouts, trying to pull material away from the retention trees. But in areas where our retention trees were small diameter, they were reset in the 1978 fire. Some of the tan oaks had very thin bark, so in the drones. And on steep slopes, it was just a lot of material with steep topography, where some areas we did have a lot more fire intensity than we would have intended, but it would have been too costly to rearrange the fuel into piles or address it in any other manner. And so our prescribed burn effects were really variable. So I'm just sharing this because it's a really important lesson learned in terms of cause and effect. We have a lot of walking scatter on the ground, how prescribed burning will interact with that, even under the most favorable conditions. And then in some areas, you can't even tell that we burned it all. And that was mostly in the oak woodland areas where we have a grassland understory. I want to speak to Bear Canyon Wildlands. Melina Hammer is the project manager there. And so she was the lead with a bunch of other folks. You were like helping the court. Actually, we could actually give this introduction a little bit better. But my notes say that this was a really important partnership project. It was apparently kind of where a bulldozer line was put in 2020. And so this was kind of a 20-acre project spanning on our property, but it was spanning 2.5 miles. You want to share a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah, that's a zoomed in shot of a project that was actually funded with PG&E settlement funds through Kim's vegetation management program in the county. And it's a shaded fuel break project that runs from Pine Flat Road, which is on the north end of the BCW1. There, that's Pine Flat Road that runs east-west, and it actually continues on to another property. And we cleared vegetation along Briggs Ranch Road, which connects in. So all in all, I can't remember how many acres or how many miles that is. 3.5 total. But yeah, we were able to get in there with contract crew, and what we're looking at here, that's 2 with different land ownerships, right? I think it's hard to tell with like the fact that it's zoomed in right now, but there were 3 different landowners pretty much that were involved in that total project area. And we did felling of large dead trees and you know, designed sort of the project around the topography. So the road, you know, follows the ridge, but the treatment kind of follows where it's feasible to actually put people on the ground. And we did a lot of you know, lock and scatter with immediate follow-up burning. And I actually was out there last week, and it looked pretty good. We still have not yet burned the piece on Sonoma Land Trust's property, but that's hopefully going to happen here in the next couple weeks before it rains on us. And everything's all set. I'm just kind of waiting on Marshall and crew to finish that project.
Cool. Okay. Is Cal Fire going to do the burn?
It's going to be Northern Sonoma Fire Protection District. That's going to lead the burn.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, I'll start telling the bird story now. So I guess one of the messages that we wanted to bring is that the forest, it's not just, not to just be viewed as forest fire fuel, that it's also habitat. And that there's a whole guild of understory birds that nest in the understory, that, I think a lot of people, when they think of a bird nest, they think of a nest up in a tree, like a robin nest or a jay nest or something, but there's just a lot of birds, like this is a Wilson's warbler, the yellow bird with the black cap. They're a neotropical migrant. They come up from Mexico and Central America in the spring and put their nests down low to the ground in the understory. And in this case, there's a Wilson's warbler nest that I found at the base of this fern that was right along one of the ridgetop roads at Headlands. So in thinking about bird monitoring for these projects, my initial hypothesis is that we should really be looking at these understory birds to see how they were going to be impacted, or I would think they would be the most impacted of the different nesting guilds. There, I can drive. But just to back up a little bit, some reasons why birds are a good tool for monitoring ecological condition and assessing management. They respond relatively fast to ecological change. And you've probably heard the expression canary in a coal mine. We say that a lot. but, you know, it sort of holds up for a lot of different species of birds when you're looking at that, at the environment. Unlike other taxa, like, reptiles, amphibians, invertebrates, and even mammals, they're pretty easy to monitor. They're highly visible, and when they're not visible, they're still audible. So that makes them relatively easy and cost-effective to monitor with standardized protocols. And there's a lot of people in the public who enjoy birds, and so you can get a lot of public enthusiasm around bird monitoring, talking about the birds. For about the last 30 years, a lot of bird conservation has focused on looking at focal species rather than species of special concern or rare and endangered species. We're looking at like landscape management, landscape conservation. Because focal species, they're generally more abundant and they give you a more holistic picture of the ecosystem. And to explain the focal species approach a little more, this illustration is sort of a conceptual illustration of what the riparian focal species look like for California. And each species has a line drawn to where they nest or where they forage in you know, different elements of that habitat. So, you know, a suite of focal species is essentially a subset of the overall avifauna or collection of bird species you have where you focus on a subset where each species needs a different critical element within that habitat, such as understory, mid-canopy, or upper canopy. And focal species can include at-risk species, but they also include umbrella species where, you know, if that umbrella species is present, then you can expect to have a whole suite of other species present as well. Also known as surrogate species, and most importantly, common species that are easily monitored so you can detect trends over time, as opposed to the uncommon species where you don't have a lot of data points over the years. And so using the presence and abundance of focal species can be used as a useful metric in evaluating habitat condition. And so for choosing the focal species at Headlands Preserve and the Sonoma Land Trust Preserves, first we looked at species that we knew occurred at the preserves. And then we looked at other bird conservation plans that have been created for coniferous habitat, which, you know, generally applies to these preserves. And we also included the regional focal species from the California State Wildlife Action Plan, which is sort of like the state blueprint for recovering at-risk species or preventing species from becoming at risk. And this is a table that shows most, but not all of the focal species. I couldn't get them all on one slide, but this is a good representative cross-section of the subspecies. And what I was trying to show here is that you have different parts of the habitat are being used by different species. You've got, you know, the nest location column shows that you have a number of species that are ground nesters. Some use snags because they're cavity nesters. And then you have birds that nest up in the canopy. And, you know, various habitat attributes that are required by each species. You know, interestingly, fantail pigeons require mineral springs. But then, you know, probably what's obvious is the woodpeckers require snags or dead trees, mature trees where they can create cavities. And then getting back to my hypothesis that the understory nesters and ground nesters would be the most impacted, these were just some of the species that I was trying to keep my eye on, and ones we pulled out in the analysis specifically to see if there were changes in, if we could detect any changes in their abundance with the surveys we use. And the monitoring protocols we use, they're, you know, widely used standardized protocols. At Jenner Headlands Preserve, we use what's called a 5-minute point count. So if you look at the map of the Jenner Headlands Preserve, the shaded polygons are the treated fuel breaks. And we tried to overlay, we have the western shaded fuel break on the left and the eastern shaded fuel break on the right. And then the green points that are kind of scattered about there within the timber harvest, what do you call it, restoration forestry area. And we resampled all of the points that we surveyed back in 2013 and 2014, and we resurveyed them in 23 and 24. I think we did all of the eastern shaded fuel break in 23 and the western shaded fuel break in 23 and 24 because there a lot of management activity happened between those two field seasons, so we wanted to capture any change there. And we did the what we're calling the Upper Russian Gulch in the restoration forestry area. We surveyed that in 2024. And even though a lot of those survey points aren't in the treatment area, it was still, we thought it was still worthwhile to resample that area because the die-off of tan oaks in that area really changed the forest structure. And so we thought it'd be interesting to look to see if there were any changes there. At the Sonoma Land Trust Preserves, because the treatment areas were of a different scale, they're generally smaller and the configuration was different. The point count wasn't the most appropriate protocol, so we used an area search method where we walked around the entire treatment area and separated into different plots and just recorded every bird we could detect within a 20-minute period. And we did the surveys at the peak of the breeding season in May and June. And yeah, baseline surveys were done at Jenner Headlands in 2013 and 2014. And then we were able to get just a snapshot of a baseline survey, round of baseline surveys for the Sonoma Land Trust Preserves in 2022, although some management had already occurred at Pole Mountain, the shaded fuel break treatments, I think, but they hadn't done the prescribed burns yet. And then we returned in 23 to Little Black Mountain because the treatments were completed by that field season. And then in 24, we did Bear Canyon Wildlands and Pole Mountain. And I think you've already seen these maps, but this is just to show you again where our area search plots were, and they overlay perfectly, I think, with the treatment areas. And so like, for example, on Bear Canyon Wildlands, BCW 1, 2, 3, and 4, those are just the 4 different area search plots that how we divided that whole treatment area. And the plot sizes ranged from 1 acre up as large as 10 acres. And so the findings, I was actually pretty surprised to see that the understory birds were not adversely affected. In fact, so the plus and minuses in this table, so plus means they increased in abundance, minus they decreased. If it's in parentheses, it's like a marginal difference within the standard of error, and no change if there's no plus or minus. And if you look at the understory species, the top half of this table, this is for the 3 survey areas at Jenner Headlands, the eastern, western shaded fuel break, and Upper Russian Gulch. There were quite a few pluses, not that many changes. You know, and similarly, if you look at the mid-story canopy focal species, we had a couple slight declines, and I know that the plus or minuses, it's not showing a magnitude of change either, but there were no real dramatic changes. So it was a real, you know, mixed result, but overall, the nesting community, the bird community, in particular the understory community, were not adversely affected. In fact, some of them seemed to increase in abundance. And so we started thinking about this, and you know, it could be a number of factors, but one big one we think is that it created more edge habitat. And so edge habitats generally promote more species diversity. You're creating more niches and just opening up what was really a decadent understory. Just maybe it actually enhanced the habitat for a lot of these species. And another thing we considered was that some of these treatment plots were a smaller scale than the general territory size of a lot of these birds.
So today, am I catching up? Here we go. Is that where we're at?
Oh, no, I was just, I guess, pontificating on that. But it's okay, we can now look at the results are similar at the Sonoma Land Trust preserves, where again, the understory species are in the top half, that plant vocals. Okay. And it didn't actually appear at when I was doing the standardized survey, but while I was just walking back to the car, a golden eagle came flying in and landed on one of the snags and I wrote it down as an incidental observation.
Almost every time I've been out there, I've seen gold.
Yeah, it seems like great eagle habitat. Yeah, so, and this is just one cool result from General Headlands. So the difference between our General Headlands data and the Sonoma Land Trust property data is there is a much longer span of time between the baseline and the follow-up. And so over that 10-year period, we saw a significant increase in species richness, so the overall number of bird species that are using these sites. And so, and the reason that, you know, it could be any number of reasons, but definitely the forest management could have played a role. One species that, even though it wasn't one of our focal species we pulled out, that was much more abundant in the post-treatment surveys was acorn woodpeckers. So that's, you know, it's interesting. We're still thinking about it and trying to come up with reasons why. I mean, there were also larger fires on the landscape between those two periods. But it may be that just, you know, opening up these areas made it more available to a species like an acorn woodpecker, where they could start using those trees along the edge as greenery trees and such. So the take-home messages from our findings so far is that the understory thinning didn't eliminate any gills at all or drastically alter the community. In fact, some birds responded positively. And so some of the reasons for this, that the treatment patch size generally smaller than territory size, and that the treatments created more edge habitat, which is generally beneficial for species diversity. But it's also important to keep in mind that, you know, these findings, they're just, the monitoring is just a snapshot in time, anywhere along this spectrum of forest management processes that are ongoing. And so, you know, we hope to be able to revisit these sites in the future and see what's happening with the bird communities over time. And so mitigating fire risk with fuels management, not only appears to not have a huge impact on the bird community, but it's also making the forest more resilient for all the bird species. So that's a real plus. And then finding that nexus between wildfire resilience and bird habitat, finding that sweet spot is what we're aiming for. Real quick, I wanted to mention eBird, because they are, in part because eBird is stewarded by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, the funder for this project. And they promote eBird for being used as a citizen scientist tool, and it could be used for these projects or any forest management projects where observers can upload their observations to eBird, create an eBird hotspot at your, you know, management project site. And then over time, as data is gathered, we can analyze these data looking at trends in species presence, absence, or abundance. And I also wanted to throw this illustration up here because it's a cool illustration, I think, that's showing, you know, the history of fire being used as a cultural tool on the landscape before Europeans arrived. And then what happened in the last 150 years with fire suppression. And so one of our long-term study sites is the Palo Field Station in the Point Reyes National Seashore. And the Park Service is now looking at doing prescribed burns and fuels reduction in that part of the seashore. Because it's an area that went from coastal prairie to coastal scrub to a very dense Doug fir forest. And we've been monitoring the birds at that site for 50 years. So we have a long-term data set there, and it's going to be really exciting when the Park Service actually starts implementing some of these practices.
Okay, so I always want to acknowledge partners, like above and beyond, you know, kind of the crew that was affiliated with this project. You know, there's just a lineage and a history. I want to acknowledge the funders that supported us in the acquisition of these conservation lands, Avian Open Space, Coastal Conservancy, and many others. And then in terms of the forest management, there's just too many to actually like put logos on the slide, but it's starting with CAL FIRE and CFIP and NRCS, State Coastal Conservancy and our Wildfire Resilience Program, County's Veg Management Program, North Sonoma Fire District, private foundations, am I forgetting any? RCD,
Yeah.
CAL FIRE, the tribe, like everybody is a part of this work. And it's just really fun to have this place in this collective vision where we're trying to make Sonoma County healthier, more fire resilient, and you know, it's part of the natural beauty that makes this such a beautiful, wonderful place to live and thrive. And we want to invite your questions.
I really appreciate the Wildlands Conservancy and Sonoma Land Trust for being so open to hosting events on site and using it as kind of an educational laboratory and being able to show the different treatments that you guys have been willing to host a lot of different groups and including Supervisor Hopkins to, you know, improve our overall understanding of how these systems work and what are these objectives for a very large conservation piece of land. So kudos to y'all for doing that. And Rich, I wondered if you, sorry, Ryan D, I wondered if you could say whether the types of treatments in various sites impacted any of the bird populations, because you had like mastication in some areas, you had hand crews working, you had shippers, and there was some good economic studies on how effective those treatments were based on where they were applied. Did that play a role in any of the data that you guys collected, or is it kind of like rolled up as this is a treated area per se?
Right now, it's the latter.
Okay.
So we can dig a little deeper.
Right.
Try to tease some information out. You know, it seems like immediately following a prescribed burn, there was very little left on the ground. So that may have had you know, a more short-term effect on birds. Yeah, it's a good question.
I might add on to that too, and just in regards to the eastern shaded field break gives us the time gap.
Okay.
And where, you know, we've had the established shaded field break, it was first initiated in 2013 and then coming back now after multiple years, whereas the other areas that we treated were just recently done, and there wasn't a baseline that was associated with that too, right? So I think in time, we need to keep doing this survey. That'd be the great thing to come back in however many years to see if there might be a difference that we could tease out based on treatment type specifically.
Right. Okay. And one other follow-up question would be, for those species that rely on interior forest components and grasslands for feeding or nesting, what have you, did you see any kind of like dynamics change there? Were they still present in a typical normal distribution in that area?
Yeah, I think all of the characters were still there.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see any species driven out
Right.
because of the treatments.
okay. Barred owl presence or not?
You know, we didn't look at barred owl presence, but I think, the owl surveys are happening.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else from the Zoom world? Do you guys want to weigh in on any types of questions?
Yeah, I had one comment to make. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, this is it's great to see this these studies continuing. It's great to see the results of some of this work, and just wanted to provide a little context. You know, one of the reasons, of course, we wanted to collect this data out in the general headlands, applying these different treatments and seeing how we were affecting these different vegetation types was, of course, for you know, feedback for adaptive management type work, but it also was outreach to the general public. And so, you know, the general headlands, part of the reasons why that property was conserved and preserved and protected was it was threat to be developed into different housing units. And so folks protested different THPs on that property. There was a conservation sale. The property was protected. And then as Sonoma Land Trust took over management of the property, you know, we wanted to do forest restoration, which involves thinning out the forest, using chainsaws and THPs, using the same methods, however, for, you know, ecological goals, and then also using fire. And so we needed a way to do outreach to the general public to show them that, you know, we're going to be collecting data on what we do out there. And we're going to be showing that, you know, we're going to be doing adaptive management, learning about what we're applying. We can measure the vegetation, but then the birds are a great indicator species of what's going on out there. And so not only does it provide information for, you know, our ecological minds in the room, but it also is a good story to the general public. And I think they understand, you know, that birds, of course, can react differently and quickly to changes in their habitat type and things of that nature. So it's a great message to also take out to the general public so that they have an understanding that we're just not willy-nilly applying these different treatments and not looking at the results. We are looking at the results. And I think this project is a great example of that.
I have a question. Do you do any treatments during nesting bird season? And would that ever be something that you would consider doing to actually try to get some baseline data and do something that might have a greater effect so that you could actually see whether or not? I mean, the biggest thing I would think is prescribed fire, spring burns. How do you get a burn in, you know, at that time of the year, and what effect would that have in terms of?
Yeah, that's a great thing. I think under the framework of the Calvin TP, that's something that we're considering now that we have that in place, but are we allowed to, based on the surveys, based on CEQA compliance and avoiding those sensitive time periods? But we're working closely with Marshall. He wrote a bird plan. He's gonna take on liability for doing prescribed burns in these newly treated areas so that we can do it on a regular basis. Timing wise, I don't know. I would assume that we would want to avoid springtime based on the bird nesting season, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Just saying for science.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, if you want to actually find out how much this stuff is impacting it, you kind of need to push it.
Yeah, and they can be burn units too. It doesn't need to be the entire.
Well, yeah, no, you're not gonna be able to treat your whole property.
Right.
Even if you wanted to. I mean, I think that that's one of the big things, takeaways for me, is that overall, on a landscape level, these treatments are very small.
Yeah.
Right? And like you were saying, the range of these species is very large. Now, would you have an impact? Yeah, obviously, if there's a nest and you burn the nest, there's going to be an impact, but I would be interested to see, like, is that a significant population impact that's happening from, like, we did a 10-acre burn, we did it in May, right? So that would be something that I would be interested to find any future results on, because that could really inform management decisions in the future.
I'd like to reach out to Pepperwood folks and whether, you think this could be replicated on your properties as more of the oak woodland grassland habitat, and with a lot of fuel treatments going on.
Yeah, I think that it'd be super cool to have this kind of research be done out at Pepperwood. I'd love to see like effects directly after prescribed fire too, because I've heard just from people in the community that birds tend, like especially raptors, come in immediately after a broadcast burn out in the grasslands and like to use it for like hunting. And I've heard like corvids will like roll around in the ash and stuff. And so uh I'd also be interested in like surveys directly after a burn and seeing, how the different birds use that. I also have a question. Did you guys see any difference in different bird species using any burned material like differently after you went through those treatment areas and burned them?
Not especially. I mean, I would expect there to be, woodpeckers are known to respond to burned areas. That's well documented in like the Sierra Nevada and other places. So, there were woodpeckers out there. I can't say if there were, more immediately after the burn. I think that also because there wasn't much time between when the burn happened and the surveys, like maybe there's a ramp up to when you get more woodpecker activity in the burn area. So maybe a few years afterwards, we'd expect to see a lot of cavities being made from the birds and then secondary cavity nesters moving in like chickadees or titmice, nuthatches.
Right. Very cool.
I have a quick question for you, Ryan, regarding, and it kind of hits on Brooke's point about using this data and getting the word out there. What are our storytelling opportunities? Is that the next step that we want to do, is sit down and is there a potential publication out of this? We don't have enough data. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly get a story out there. I don't know if it's going to be in a peer-reviewed publication or, something that SLT or Wildlands Conservancy puts out. Like just an update on this project.
I think ideally we would be able to return to these sites every few years and get a longer term picture of the trend line and, the health of these forests. I also really like Kim's idea of finding some other project sites to pair it with.
Well, how about Eel River or any of the other TWC lands? Would that make sense to have a similar thing?
Yeah, I guess we kind of discussed this a little bit, and I give, Shanti a lot of credit for the grant administrative side and, the amount of the grant and how much work went into it. Sometimes that juice and squeeze thing has to be thought of, but certainly as we scale up, I mean, again, birds are excellent indicators, and why wouldn't we use it? It just comes down to time and money.
Right.
I think that, so just to share out that we've been invited by Cornell Lab of Ornithology to present at the California Council of Land Trusts in the spring. And that's going to be in Yosemite and kind of convening lots of land trusts in kind of the mountainous region where lots of folks are implementing wildfire resilience projects. I think our main headlines are that, we are kind of using kind of a framework of, utilizing field treatments, outside of bird nesting season and trying to retain snags and down logs, but really thinking about, using birds as an indicator and how we found that, kind of these areas rebounded, maybe the patch size was too small to really detect a difference, but really focusing on the birds is really helping us to think about biodiversity in general as we kind of have these parallel tracks of entering the forest and doing kind of some pretty heavy-handed, dramatic work for fuel reduction that we're always keeping in mind forest health and wildlife habitat goals as well.
I think about like how our goal is to try to create the best management practices for any of these fuel treatments. And we have a good sense of what to do from a forestry perspective and how to thin out a ridge line to create these shaded fuel breaks for treatments like that, and how to do prescribed burns. But is there an opportunity for Point Blue to create like a best management practices for monitoring bird species so that it could try to be replicated at a scale that would make sense for landowners of over 100 acres or 500 acres? Or is there like a scale factor there? One of the challenges we constantly run into is like, it's great when TWC can do it or Ag and Open Space can do it because they have like the back pocket full of good cash to be able to do these types of things. Is there a way in which we can make it practical so that landowners who are confronted with, not the kind of cash that we have can do this work on a sustainable basis?
Yeah, like create a handbook on doing some monitoring before and after. Yeah.
Or adding a chapter to tending the land, by the way, the website you all are so familiar with right now that might be a good idea, like thinking about the wildlife connection to fuel treatments. Tending the Land is a website that was created by this group and led by Sonoma Ecology Center. So yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Also just want to spotlight Point Blue's rangeland monitoring network, which is like kind of up and down California, looking at rangelands, and, various indicators. And actually, maybe you should share out what that is and how it's kind of like a sister project to this, at a much larger scale.
Yeah, so we have over 100 ranches in the Rangeland Monitoring Network, from, the northern border of California down to San Diego now. And it's mostly cattle ranches, there are a couple other kind of ranches out there too, but we're looking at birds, vegetation, and metrics of soil health, and trying to look to see how management is moving the needle on any one of those indicators. So we're 10 years into it now, so we're trying to figure out how best to harness those data and make the most of what we're learning.
Yeah. And our preserves are project sites of that program. So it's like, looking at the grasslands, now looking at the forests, and just having the most exceptional partner that can do that work helps us to adaptively manage our land.
Fantastic. Good.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you, folks. Appreciate it. Stop sharing on your screen.
Go ahead. Oh, wait, no, there's one. Sorry.
All right, just going back to our agenda, I think we're pretty close to finishing up. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to.
I think we'll just go over workshops.
Yeah, great. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So many of you might have already heard about the Land and Good Fire workshop series that Fire Forward's putting on. They have 3 more left. So one is tomorrow at Annandale State Park. And then that's looking at more of an woodland and Doug fir ecotype. And then another one is on October 20th. So that's this Sunday. And that one is in an old growth redwood area with significant die-off of tan oak due to sudden oak death. And that's also an area that had prescribed burns in the last few months. And so as part of that workshop, you'll be able to go and see like 4 months post burn. And that one is pretty far north. And so Fire Forward actually put together 2 different carpool opportunities, and I can forward that information afterwards if anyone's interested. But I think they're leaving from Windsor and Brenner Park if anyone wants to hop into a carpool, because they still have openings for that. And then on Saturday, Kim already talked a bit about our workshop that we're doing with Cal Poly at Oddfellows, and that one is all full, but hopefully we'll have another in March. And then one that we just put the registration link live for is on November 2nd. we're actually gonna be going to Brock Dolman's home on Vermont Road, where he has worked with the RCD to install a rainwater catchment system and also done a significant amount of defensible space work. And so that workshop is to talk about those kind of fire resilience measures and also for landowners or homeowners who are interested in rainwater catchment systems and how to kind of tie all that work together. And registration's open now for that. And then the other workshops that we have aren't quite ready to be announced yet, but we're talking about working on some workforce development, forestry work as a part of this workshop series. And we'll also be tying in early next year with land smart grazing to have a few workshops that are focused on grazing to reduce fuel loads. Yeah, that's kind of the report right now. And if anyone else has workshops or events they want to share about, please feel free.
The bulk of these workshops are being funded by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant that Ag and Open Space received from NIFWIF and co-written by Adriana at Gold Ridge RCD. And so we are really trying to take our model where we had a big event in June last year for the Forest Conservation Working Group, basically taking that event on the road so that we can get to communities so that communities have better access to these resources, and we can adjust the schedule, the agenda for a specific event based on the needs of those particular community members. So really is to try to connect people to good resources, folks like Fred in the forestry sector and various communities who have done work and can really, we can put the teacher's hat on those folks that they can share with their neighbors how this work's done. So that's really kind of the gist of the work we're doing. So, and that's ideally, this is what our hope is that those workshops will lead to future forest or fuel management projects that we've been able to fund through the vegetation management grant program. We've done the traditional request for proposal. This is another option to be able to do workshops and then generate some good projects from those. All right, does anybody else from the Zoom world have anything they want to share? Anybody in the room have any? We have some great treats over there next to Jason's recording. I know that's right.
Oh my God, does Fred have something to add?
Hey, this is Fred. How you doing?
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see or hear me, but I'd like to get a workshop in or like the weekend after Thanksgiving to do. I've got about 60 acres of burn piles that would be a wonderful opportunity for a workshop. I'll put it out to all the good fire people, but it's the residue from a little bit of redwood thinning, and it's already in the 4-foot piles. And we'll watch the weather as we get up to it, but it would be great to do. You know, another barbecue.
Hey Fred, where would that be?
That would be up Mill Creek in the Walbridge fire area. It's the residue from thinning the resprouting redwoods following the clear cut. As you'll recall, you helped mark it.
You mean that selectively thinned forest that you're doing?
Yeah, that's the one.
Sounds good. Thank you, Fred. I appreciate that.
Fred, I'm just saying hi. It's been a while since I've seen you, and just to recognize Fred was our RPF for the timber harvest and helped us pull that off. So thanks for all your efforts there, Fred.
And shout out to you, Ryan. You are our poster boy in the newspaper. Congrats on that.
All right, with that, unless there's anything else from the Zoom world, we really appreciate you guys tuning in today. And we look forward to more action in November. We'll send out the invitation and keep track of the workshops that are coming up. And thanks, folks, for joining us. Thank you for facilitating, Rose.
And then just really quickly, those are all on the website, right? all of
Yes.
the workshops, signups, so anybody looking for that, okay, yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's good. They are on the website, for the, Forest Conservation Working Group. All right. Thanks, folks. We'll see ya.